I never thought a bucket of white powder would land me in the middle of a legal nightmare. But here I was, standing in my driveway at 6 in the morning while Patricia Henderson from the HOA board screamed at me about chemical weapons. Let me back up a bit. My name is Lucas Emerson, and I had just moved into Meadowbrook Estates in Boise, Idaho, 6 months ago. It was one of those cookie-cutter suburban developments where every house looked vaguely similar. The lawns were required to be exactly 2.5 inches tall, and the HOA ruled with an iron fist wrapped in passive-aggressive newsletters. I had inherited my grandfather's ice-melting formula, a family secret that had been passed down through 4 generations of Emersons. My great-great-grandfather had developed it back in the 1920s when he ran a transportation company in Minnesota, and it worked better than anything you could buy at the hardware store. The stuff was magic. While my neighbors were out there 3 times a day chipping away at ice or watching their concrete get eaten away by regular rock salt, my driveway stayed clear and ice-free after just 1 application. No residue, no plant damage, and it worked down to temperatures that would make a polar bear complain. I used it sparingly, mixing small batches in my garage according to the formula my grandfather had written in his journal, which I kept locked in a safe. Everything was fine until we had that freak ice storm in January. Boise does not get a lot of winter weather, but when it does, the city basically shuts down. 3 inches of ice coated everything, and the whole neighborhood turned into a skating rink. Except for my driveway and walkway, which were perfectly clear and dry within an hour of me applying my grandfather's mixture. That was when Patricia noticed. Patricia Henderson was 52 years old, had that distinctive haircut where the back is shorter than the front, and she drove a white Lexus SUV with a bumper sticker that said, "I speak to managers for fun." She was the president of the Meadowbrook Estates HOA, and she took her job more seriously than most people take national security. I was bringing in groceries when she marched across the street, her boots clicking on the ice that covered her own driveway. She had to grab my mailbox to keep from falling, which did not improve her mood. "Lucas," she called out, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Lucas Emerson." I set down my bags and turned to face her. "Morning, Patricia. Careful there, it's slippery." She finally made it to my driveway and seemed surprised when her feet found solid traction. She looked down at the bare concrete, then up at me, her eyes narrowing behind her designer glasses. "What did you use on your driveway?" "Just some ice melt," I said, picking up my groceries again. "Nothing special." "Nothing special." She gestured wildly at the ice rink that was the rest of the neighborhood. "Every single house on this street is covered in ice. Carol from number 42 fell and sprained her wrist, but your driveway looks like it's the middle of July." "What product did you use?" I should have just made something up. I should have said I bought it at Home Depot and left it at that. But I was tired. I had frozen food melting in my bags and I was not thinking clearly. "It's a family recipe," I said. "My grandfather developed it." Patricia's eyes lit up like I had just told her where the Holy Grail was buried. "A recipe? You mean you make it yourself?" "Yeah, but look, I really need to get these groceries inside." She stepped in front of me, blocking my path. "The HOA needs that recipe, Lucas. For the safety of the community. It's only fair that you share it with your neighbors." I felt my jaw tighten. "It's a family secret, Patricia. I'm not sharing it." "A family secret." She said it like I had just claimed to be descended from aliens. "This is a community, Lucas. We share things here. That's what makes us strong. I'll be bringing this up at the next board meeting." She turned and carefully made her way back across the ice toward her house, already pulling out her phone. I knew I should have been more worried, but honestly, I thought she would forget about it. I was wrong. The next HOA meeting was 3 days later. I did not usually attend these things because they were boring as hell and mostly consisted of Patricia and the other board members arguing about whether beige or tan was a more appropriate house color. But I got a certified letter delivered to my door that afternoon informing me that my presence was mandatory, and that failure to attend may result in fines and other penalties. The meeting was held in the community center, a bland rectangular building that smelled like old coffee and disappointment. About 30 residents were scattered around the folding chairs, most of them looking like they would rather be anywhere else. Patricia stood at the front with the other board members. Brenda Martinez, the secretary who always looked vaguely confused, and Tom Richardson, the treasurer who spent most meetings playing games on his phone. "Good evening, everyone," Patricia began, her voice echoing in the sparse room. "We have a lot to cover tonight, but first I want to address a matter of community safety and fairness." I had a sinking feeling I knew where this was going. As you all know, we experienced a dangerous ice storm this week. Many of our residents were injured or unable to leave their homes safely. However, one resident had a solution that worked perfectly. She turned and pointed directly at me. "Lucas Emerson has access to an ice melting formula that is clearly superior to anything available commercially, yet he has refused to share this formula with the community." Heads turned. I felt about 24 pairs of eyes land on me. "Now hold on," I said, standing up. "I never refused anything. You asked me to give you my family's secret formula and I said no. That's my right." "Is it?" Patricia's smile was predatory. "According to the HOA bylaws, Section 7, Paragraph 3, residents are required to maintain their properties in a manner that does not create unfair advantages or safety hazards for other residents." "How is having a clear driveway a safety hazard?" "Because," she said slowly, like she was explaining something to a child, "when only one driveway in the entire neighborhood is clear, it creates an attractive nuisance. People might try to access your property for safety, creating liability issues. Additionally, by having access to superior snow and ice removal methods and refusing to share them, you are creating an unfair advantage." I could not believe what I was hearing. An unfair advantage. It's a driveway, Patricia, not a nuclear weapon. "The point stands," she continued, ignoring me. "I am proposing a motion that the HOA require Lucas Emerson to provide the formula for his ice melting compound so that it can be made available to all residents." All in favor. Brenda and Tom both raised their hands immediately. They always voted however Patricia told them to. "Motion passes," Patricia announced triumphantly. "Lucas, you have 1 week to provide the HOA board with your formula, along with detailed instructions for its manufacture. Failure to comply will result in fines of $500 per day." "You can't be serious," I said. "You can't just demand someone's intellectual property." "We can and we are. This is for the good of the community. If you have a problem with it, you can take it up with our attorney." I left that meeting angrier than I had been in years. The whole drive home, I kept replaying Patricia's smug face in my mind. $500 a day. That was insane. That was extortion. But I also knew that fighting the HOA would be expensive and time-consuming, and there was no guarantee I would win. When I got home, I called my cousin Derek, who was a lawyer in Portland. He listened to my story and then let out a long whistle. "That's wild, man," he said. "But here's the thing. HOA bylaws can be pretty broad, and if you signed the covenants when you bought the house, you might have agreed to some stuff without realizing it. So I should just hand over my grandfather's formula? Hell no. That's your property, intellectual and otherwise. But you need to be smart about this. Don't ignore their deadline. Send them a formal letter declining their request and citing your reasons. Make it clear that the formula is proprietary family knowledge that has potential commercial value. That establishes it as trade secret, which has legal protection. And the fines, don't pay them. Let them try to collect. If they do, that's when you sue them for overreach. But honestly, Lucas, it probably will not get that far. HOAs like to threaten and bluster, but when you actually stand up to them with proper legal backing, they usually back down. Derek helped me draft a letter that night. It was professional and polite but firm. It explained that the ice melting formula was proprietary family knowledge that had been developed over generations and represented significant intellectual property value. It pointed out that no HOA bylaw could legally compel a resident to surrender private intellectual property, and that any attempt to fine me for refusing to do so would be met with legal action. I hand-delivered the letter to Patricia's house the next morning. She answered the door in a bathrobe, her hair in curlers, and her face went through about 5 different expressions as she read the letter. "You think you are so smart," she said when she finished. "Hiding behind lawyers and legal mumbo-jumbo. This is not over, Lucas." "I never thought it was," I replied. She slammed the door hard enough to rattle the windows. I walked back home feeling like I had just won a small victory, but I knew the war was far from over. The fines started appearing in my mailbox the next week. Certified letters informing me that I owed the HOA $500 for each day I had failed to comply with their directive. After 10 days, they claimed I owed $5,000. The letters got increasingly threatening, mentioning liens, legal action, and even foreclosure. I did not pay a cent. Instead, Derek and I started building a case. He researched HOA law extensively and found dozens of cases where HOAs had overreached and been slapped down by courts. He was confident we could win if it came to a lawsuit, but Patricia was not done yet, not by a long shot. It started with the inspections. Suddenly, the HOA was finding violations everywhere on my property. My grass was allegedly a 1/4 inch too long. My garbage cans were visible from the street for 7 minutes longer than allowed. My mailbox was the wrong shade of black. Each violation came with a fine. $50 here, $100 there. It was death by 1,000 paper cuts. I documented everything. I took photos with timestamps. I measured my grass with a ruler. I painted my mailbox with the exact color specified in the HOA guidelines, taking it directly from the Sherwin-Williams store with a receipt. Every time they claimed a violation, I proved them wrong. Then she escalated again. I came home from work one Tuesday in early February to find 2 police cars parked in front of my house. My heart jumped into my throat as I pulled into my driveway. 2 officers were standing on my front porch, and Patricia was with them, gesturing wildly and talking rapidly. I got out of my car slowly, my hands visible. "Officers, what's going on?" The older cop, a guy in his 50s with gray hair and tired eyes, turned to me. "Are you Lucas Emerson?" "Yes, sir." "I'm Officer Daniels. This is Officer Kowalski. We got a call about suspicious chemical storage on this property. You mind if we ask you a few questions?" I looked at Patricia, who was practically vibrating with self-satisfaction. "Let me guess who made the call." "Miss Henderson here expressed concern that you might be manufacturing illegal substances," Officer Daniels said. His tone suggested he was not entirely buying it, but he had to follow up on the complaint. "I make ice melt," I said flatly. "For my driveway, from a family recipe." "Can we see where you make this ice melt?" I did not want to let them in, but I also knew that refusing would make me look guilty. "Sure. It's in my garage, but I'm not showing you the formula." "That's fine, sir. We just need to verify there's nothing illegal happening." I unlocked the garage and showed them my setup. It was not much. I had a workbench with some containers, a scale, measuring cups, and a few bags of ingredients. Everything was neatly labeled and organized. Officer Kowalski picked up one of the bags and read the label. Magnesium chloride. "That's legal." "Everything I use is completely legal," I said. "You can buy all of it at hardware stores or chemical supply companies. I just mix it in specific proportions that make it work better." Officer Daniels looked around the garage, opened a few containers, and then turned to Patricia. "Miss Henderson, there's nothing illegal here. Just looks like a guy who likes to mix his own ice melt." "But you have not tested it," Patricia protested. "What if there's something dangerous in it? What if it's toxic?" "Madam, we're not chemists." "If you think there's actually something toxic, you need to contact the EPA or the health department. But from what I can see, this is all legal household products." Patricia's face turned red. "This is ridiculous. He's putting the community at risk by having a clear driveway." Officer Kowalski said, and I caught a hint of amusement in his voice. "Look, madam, we've responded to your complaint. There's no evidence of any crime here. We can't do anything else." After the police left, Patricia stood in my driveway, her arms crossed, glaring at me. "You think you have won, don't you?" "I think you just wasted police resources on a petty HOA dispute," I said. "And I think you should go home. The board is meeting tomorrow. We're going to discuss further action." "You do that, Patricia. My lawyer is looking forward to it." She stalked off, and I went inside feeling shaky. Having the police show up at your house was terrifying, even when you knew you had not done anything wrong. I called Derek and told him what happened. "That's harassment," he said immediately. "And filing a false police report could be a crime." "You need to start thinking about going on the offense here, Lucas. File a complaint against her with the police. Sue the HOA for harassment. Hit them hard enough that they back off." "I just want to be left alone," I said. "I don't want a war." "I get that, but Patricia already started the war. You're just deciding whether to fight back or let her win." I thought about it all night. By morning, I had made my decision. I filed a formal harassment complaint with the boys' police department, detailing the false chemical complaint and the pattern of harassment from the HOA. I also had Derek draft a cease and desist letter to the HOA board, warning them that any further harassment or bogus fines would result in legal action. The response was swift and predictable. Patricia called an emergency HOA meeting and proposed that I be fined an additional $10,000 for bringing negative attention to the community and filing frivolous complaints against board members. But something had changed. Maybe it was because other residents were getting tired of Patricia's antics, or maybe word had spread about the police incident and people were starting to see how crazy this had gotten. Whatever the reason, when Patricia called for a vote on the new fines, several residents stood up and objected. "This has gone too far, Patricia," said an older man named George who lived 2 houses down from me. "The guy just wants to use his own ice melt. Why do we care?" "It's about fairness," Patricia insisted. "It's about community." "It's about you wanting to control everything," someone else called out. "I'm sick of these constant fines and rules. We can't even choose our own mailbox colors without board approval." The meeting devolved into chaos. People started airing grievances they had been holding back for years. It turned out Patricia had been terrorizing the neighborhood long before I moved in. There were stories about fines for Christmas decorations, threats over fence heights, and one particularly insane incident where she had tried to ban a resident from planting tomatoes because they were agricultural products, and the neighborhood was residential only. By the end of the meeting, 3 separate residents had announced they were running for HOA board positions in the upcoming election. Patricia looked shell-shocked. I thought maybe, finally, this was the beginning of the end. I was wrong again. 2 weeks later, I woke up at 3 in the morning to my smoke alarm screaming. I bolted out of bed, my heart hammering, and smelled smoke. I ran downstairs and found my garage door closed but smoke seeping out from underneath it. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911 while running outside. 911, what's your emergency? My garage is on fire. I need the fire department now. I gave them my address and then ran around to the side of the house where I could see into the garage through a small window. Flames were licking up the walls and my workbench was completely engulfed. The fire department arrived in less than 10 minutes, but by then the flames had spread to part of my kitchen. They got it under control quickly, and fortunately the damage was contained to the garage and part of the kitchen. But my workbench was destroyed. All my equipment, my supplies, and worst of all, my grandfather's journal with the formula, everything was gone. I stood in my front yard in my pajamas, wrapped in a blanket the paramedics had given me, and watched the firefighters work. Neighbors had come out to see what was happening, standing in clusters on the street. I saw Patricia among them, standing at the edge of her driveway, and even from a distance, I could see the satisfied look on her face. The fire marshal came to talk to me after about an hour. His name was Chief Reynolds, and he looked grim. Mr. Emerson, we're going to need to investigate this. The point of origin appears to be your workbench area, and there are signs that accelerant was used. Accelerant? You mean someone set this deliberately? That's what it looks like. Do you have any enemies? Anyone who might want to harm you or your property? I looked across the street at Patricia. Chief Reynolds followed my gaze. The HOA president, he asked. We've been having a dispute. A bad one. She wanted me to give her my ice melt formula and I refused. She's been harassing me for weeks. Chief Reynolds wrote that down. I'll need details on that, and we'll be conducting a full investigation. If this was arson, it's a serious crime. The police came back, this time in the form of a detective named Sarah Mitchell. She was in her 40s, sharp-eyed and no-nonsense. I told her everything. The HOA demands the escalating harassment, the false police report, Patricia's satisfaction when she saw my garage burning. That's not proof, Detective Mitchell said, but it's certainly suspicious. We'll interview her and other neighbors. In the meantime, do you have somewhere else to stay? Your house is technically still safe, but there's smoke and water damage. I ended up staying with a friend across town for a few days while the investigation proceeded. Derek drove down from Portland to help me deal with insurance companies and to advise on the legal situation. This is attempted murder, Lucas, he said seriously, as we sat in a Denny's at 2 in the afternoon. If she set that fire or had someone do it, she could be looking at serious prison time. I just want my grandfather's formula back, I said miserably. That journal was the only copy. 80 years of family knowledge gone. You don't remember any of it. Some, but not all the exact proportions. Grandfather was specific about measurements. Too much of one ingredient and it does not work right. Too little and it's just regular salt. The investigation took 3 weeks. In that time, I learned some interesting things. It turned out that Patricia had been making some questionable financial decisions with HOA funds. The quarterly reports she filed were vague and incomplete, and when a few residents started asking questions, they discovered that about $30,000 was unaccounted for over the past 2 years. Tom Richardson, the treasurer who had always voted with Patricia, suddenly developed a conscience when the police started asking questions. He came forward with evidence that Patricia had been using HOA funds for personal expenses. including a vacation to Hawaii and renovations to her own home. He claimed he had been afraid to speak up because Patricia had threatened to fabricate violations against him if he did not cooperate. Then came the breakthrough in the arson investigation. A neighbor 3 houses down had a security camera that faced the street. The footage showed a figure approaching my house at 2:45 on the night of the fire, going around to the side gate and entering my backyard. 30 minutes later, the same figure left, and 5 minutes after that, my smoke alarms went off. The figure was dressed in dark clothing and was hard to identify, but the police were able to enhance the footage enough to get a general description. Female, medium height, middle-aged. The woman had gotten out of a white Lexus SUV that had been parked 2 blocks away. Patricia drove a white Lexus SUV. Detective Mitchell brought her in for questioning. I was not there, of course, but Derek found out through his contacts that Patricia had an alibi. She claimed she was home asleep at the time of the fire. Her husband backed up her story. But then the forensics came back. The accelerant used in the fire was a common lighter fluid, and when police executed a search warrant on Patricia's home, they found a bottle of the same brand in her garage. It was 3/4 empty, and there were traces of it on a pair of gloves they found in her car. Patricia was arrested on March 5th and charged with first-degree arson. Her bail was set at $100,000, which she managed to post, but the damage was done. The story hit the local news, and suddenly everyone in Boise knew about the crazy HOA president, who had allegedly burned down a resident's garage over an ice melt formula. The HOA held an emergency meeting and voted unanimously to remove Patricia from the board. Brenda Martinez resigned as well, saying she could not handle the stress. Tom Richardson stayed on as treasurer but was placed under scrutiny to ensure all future financial dealings were transparent. 3 new board members were elected in a special vote, including George, the older man who had spoken up at that chaotic meeting. The new board's first order of business was to formally apologize to me and rescind all the fines Patricia had levied. They also offered to pay for my fire damage, though my insurance had already covered most of it. But I still had a problem. I had lost my grandfather's formula. I spent weeks trying to recreate it from memory. I knew the main ingredients: magnesium chloride, calcium chloride, and a few other compounds, but the exact proportions were lost. I tried dozens of combinations, and nothing worked quite right. Either it was too corrosive, or it did not melt ice effectively, or it left residue everywhere. One night in late March, I was sitting in my rebuilt garage, staring at my latest failed batch when my phone rang. It was my Aunt Helen, my grandfather's daughter, calling from her home in Minneapolis. "Lucas, honey, I heard about the fire. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, Aunt Helen. The house is fixed up now. I'm just bummed about losing Grandpa's journal." "The one with the ice melt formula?" "Yeah, I've been trying to recreate it, but I can't get it right." There was a pause. Then Aunt Helen said, "Well, I might be able to help with that." My heart skipped. "What do you mean?" "Your grandfather was paranoid about losing that formula. He kept the journal, sure, but he also sent copies to me and your Uncle Frank. He wanted to make sure it stayed in the family no matter what. I have the copy in a safe deposit box. I can send you a scan tonight." I almost cried. "Aunt Helen, you're a lifesaver. Family takes care of family, sweetie. Your grandfather would have wanted you to have it." True to her word, she emailed me a high-resolution scan that evening. It was all there. Every ingredient, every measurement, every note my grandfather had made over the years. I printed it out and immediately mixed up a batch. It worked perfectly. Patricia's trial was in June. Derek helped me attend as a witness, though my testimony was brief. I simply confirmed the timeline of events and the harassment I had experienced. The real evidence was the forensic data and the security footage. The jury found Patricia guilty of first-degree arson. The judge also charged her with embezzlement for the misuse of HOA funds and harassment for her treatment of me and other residents. She was sentenced to 8 years in prison and ordered to pay restitution to both me and the HOA. Her husband filed for divorce while she was awaiting sentencing. Life in Meadowbrook Estates got a lot quieter after that. The new HOA board was reasonable and focused on actual community improvement rather than petty rule enforcement. They organized neighborhood barbecues and fixed the playground. George turned out to be a great president who actually listened to residents. As for me, I kept my grandfather's formula secret, but I did start helping my neighbors when winter came around again. I would mix up small batches and give them to elderly residents or anyone who asked nicely. I did not share the exact formula, but I shared the benefits, which felt like the right balance. One snowy morning in December, almost a year after the initial confrontation with Patricia, I was out salting my driveway when George walked over. He was carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might want some," he said, handing me one. "Thanks, George." We stood there sipping coffee and watching the snow fall. "You know," George said, "I'm glad you stood up to Patricia. She needed to be stopped. But I'm also glad you're still willing to help people out, even after everything that happened." Grandpa always said the formula was meant to help people, not hurt them. I think he would have been happy to see neighbors helping each other. "Your grandfather sounds like he was a good man." He was. We finished our coffee in comfortable silence. Down the street I could see other residents coming out to clear their driveways. A few of them waved. The neighborhood felt different now, lighter, like a weight had been lifted. My phone buzzed with a text from Derek. "Hey cuz, saw Patricia's appeal was denied. She's staying in prison. Justice served." I smiled and pocketed my phone. Justice had been served, but more importantly, I had learned something valuable. Standing up for yourself was hard, especially against someone who had power over you. But it was worth it. And sometimes the fight revealed allies you did not know you had. I finished salting my driveway and then mixed up a few extra batches for my neighbors. As I walked from house to house, dropping off containers of the formula with instructions to use it sparingly, I thought about my grandfather. He had developed this mixture to help people, to make their lives a little easier during harsh Minnesota winters. Now it was doing the same thing in Idaho, bringing a community together instead of tearing it apart. Mrs. Chen from number 38 opened her door when I knocked, her face lighting up when she saw the container. "Oh, Lucas, you are so kind. My arthritis makes it hard to shovel." "No problem, Mrs. Chen. Just sprinkle this on the ice before the next storm. It'll keep your walkway clear. You are a blessing to this neighborhood." I headed home as the sun was setting, painting the snowy streets gold and pink. My driveway was clear, my garage was rebuilt, and my grandfather's legacy was safe. More than that, I had friends in the neighborhood now. Real friends who had stood by me during the worst of the harassment. That night, I sat down and made a copy of the formula, just like my grandfather had done. I sent one to Derek and one to my cousin Maria in Chicago. I put the original back in the safe. The formula would stay in the family, protected and preserved, but it would also be used to help people. That was the balance my grandfather had always intended. Spring came, and with it, new life in the neighborhood. The HOA organized a community garden, something Patricia would have never allowed. I contributed by helping design an irrigation system. It felt good to be part of something positive instead of being constantly on the defensive. In May, I got a letter from Patricia. It was forwarded through her lawyer, and I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity got the better of me. The letter was surprisingly brief. Mr. Emerson, I am writing to apologize for my actions. I let my need for control spiral into something terrible, and I hurt you and others in the process. I take full responsibility for what I did. I do not expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I am sorry. Patricia Henderson. I read it twice, trying to decide how I felt. Part of me was still angry. She had burned down my garage and tried to destroy my grandfather's legacy. But another part of me felt something like pity. Patricia had thrown away her entire life over a power trip. She had lost her freedom, her marriage, her reputation, all because she could not stand the idea of someone saying no to her. I folded the letter and put it in a drawer. I was not ready to forgive her, and maybe I never would be, but I could acknowledge that she had at least taken responsibility. Summer brought barbecues and block parties. George and his wife hosted one in July, and it seemed like the entire neighborhood turned out. Kids ran through sprinklers while adults grilled burgers and hot dogs. Someone set up a volleyball net. I found myself laughing more than I had in months. A new family moved into Patricia's old house in August. They were young, with 2 small kids and a friendly golden retriever named Biscuit. The husband, James, came over to introduce himself, and I ended up helping them move furniture. Everyone keeps telling us this neighborhood used to be really intense with HOA stuff, James said as we carried a couch up his front steps. But it seems pretty chill now. It got a lot better recently, I said. Long story. Well, we're glad to be here. The neighbors all seem great. Watching their kids play with Biscuit in the front yard, I felt a sense of contentment I had not expected. The neighborhood had been through a storm, literal and figurative, but it had come out stronger on the other side. In October, the first snow of the season fell. It was light, just a dusting, but enough that people started thinking about winter preparations. I got several texts asking if I would be making my special ice melt again this year. I mixed up a large batch and distributed it to anyone who wanted some. This time, I did not hide what I was doing. I set up a table in my driveway one Saturday morning with a sign that said, "Free Ice Melt Family Recipe." People came by all morning, and I gave each person a container with careful instructions on how to use it. "You could sell this stuff, you know," George said, stopping by with his empty container from last year. "Make a fortune." "Maybe someday," I said, "but for now I'm happy just helping out. Your grandfather would be proud." Those words stuck with me. Would Grandpa be proud? I thought about the journal, about his careful notes and precise measurements. He had spent years perfecting that formula, not for profit, but because he wanted to create something useful. He had passed it down through the family because he trusted us to use it responsibly. I think he would have been proud, not because I had defended the formula against Patricia's demands, but because I had found a way to honor both his legacy and my community. The formula remained a family secret in its specifics, but its benefits were shared with anyone who needed them. Winter settled in for real in November. We got a major snowstorm that dumped 8 inches on boys, and the neighborhood came together to help clear streets and driveways. I distributed more of the formula, and people were amazed at how well it worked. But more importantly, they were grateful. The sense of community that had been crushed under Patricia's authoritarian rule was flourishing. The HOA board sent out a newsletter in December highlighting community achievements over the past year. There was a section about neighborhood heroes, and I was embarrassed to find myself mentioned alongside people who had organized food drives and park cleanups. George had written a paragraph about how I had stood up against unfair treatment and then chosen kindness over bitterness. I kept that newsletter, Christmas came, and the neighborhood was transformed with lights and decorations. Under the old regime, there had been strict rules about what colors you could use and when lights had to be taken down. Now, people went wild with creativity. My next-door neighbor built an entire winter wonderland scene with animated figures. It was gloriously tacky, and everyone loved it. I kept things simple with some white icicle lights and a wreath on the door. On Christmas Eve, I invited some neighbors over for hot chocolate and cookies. We sat around my fireplace, sharing stories and laughing. These were people who had been strangers a year ago, and now they were friends. "To surviving the HOA wars," George said, raising his mug. We all laughed and clinked our mugs together. The fire crackled, snow fell softly outside, and for the first time since moving to Meadowbrook Estates, I felt truly at home. On New Year's Eve, I stood on my clear, ice-free driveway and watched fireworks explode over boys. I thought about everything that had happened over the past year. The confrontation, the harassment, the fire, the trial, and finally, the resolution. It had been exhausting and terrifying and infuriating, but I had come through it. More than that, I had learned something about standing up for yourself. About not letting bullies win, even when they had power and authority. About the importance of community and how quickly things could change when good people decided to act. My phone buzzed with texts as midnight approached. Derek sent a gif of fireworks. Aunt Helen sent a family photo. My neighbors sent well wishes and thanks for the ice melt. I responded to each one, feeling connected to a wider network of people who cared. As the clock struck midnight and the fireworks reached their crescendo, I made a resolution. I would have the formula officially documented and registered as a trade secret. I would create a family trust to ensure it stayed protected for future generations. And I would continue using it to help my community, because that was what my grandfather had intended all along. The new year brought new possibilities. The HOA board announced they were revising the bylaws to prevent the kind of overreach Patricia had engaged in. They created a formal appeals process for any fines or violations, and they established term limits for board members. George stepped down as president after a year, saying he believed in rotation of leadership. A younger woman named Sarah took over, and she brought fresh energy and ideas. I settled into a comfortable routine. Work during the week, helping neighbors on weekends. I started dating a woman named Amy who worked at the library downtown. She thought the whole HOA saga was both hilarious and horrifying, and she was impressed that I had stood my ground. "Not many people would fight that hard over a principle," she said over dinner one night. "It wasn't just principle," I said. "It was family, my grandfather's legacy. I couldn't let someone like Patricia take that away." "Well, I'm glad you won. We all won, really. The whole neighborhood is better now." In March, I got a call from the district attorney's office. Patricia was up for parole review, and they wanted to know if I had any statement to make. I thought about it for a few days before deciding to write a letter. I kept it factual and brief. I described the harm she had caused, not just to me but to the entire community. I acknowledged her apology but noted that her actions had been calculated and cruel, and that she had shown no remorse until after she was caught. I said I did not think she should be released early. The parole board agreed. Patricia would serve her full sentence. Life moved on. Seasons changed. My relationship with Amy deepened, and we talked about moving in together. The neighborhood continued to thrive under reasonable HOA leadership. My grandfather's formula remained a family secret, carefully guarded but generously shared. 2 years after the fire, I was working in my garage when I heard a knock on the door. It was a young man, maybe 25, with nervous eyes and shifting feet. "Can I help you?" I asked. "Mr. Emerson, My name is David. I'm Patricia Henderson's son. I tensed immediately. Okay. I just wanted to come by and apologize for what my mother did. I know it doesn't mean much coming from me, but our whole family is ashamed of her actions. She was always controlling, but we never thought she would do something so extreme. I studied him. He looked genuinely remorseful, and I could see the family resemblance around the eyes and jawline. I appreciate you coming by, David. That took courage. I also wanted you to know that I testified against her at trial. When the lawyers came asking questions, I told them about her behavior, about how obsessed she had gotten with controlling the neighborhood. My testimony helped convict her. That was news to me. You did? Yeah. Dad wanted me to lie to protect her, but I couldn't. What she did was wrong. It could have killed you. We talked for a while longer. David was studying engineering at Boise State and had moved out of the family home years ago to escape his mother's controlling nature. He had cut ties with his father after the divorce and was trying to build a life separate from their toxic influence. If you ever need anything, I said as he was leaving, let me know. I know what it's like to deal with difficult people. He smiled, and some of the tension left his shoulders. Thanks, Mr. Emerson. That means a lot. After he left, I thought about how far the ripples of Patricia's actions had spread. She had not just hurt me and the neighborhood, she had damaged her own family. Her need for control had cost her everything, but out of that destruction had come growth. A better HOA, a stronger community, a young man finding his own path, and me, standing in my garage with my grandfather's formula safely preserved, knowing that I had fought for what mattered and won. That night, I pulled out the journal one more time. I ran my fingers over my grandfather's handwriting, precise and careful. On the last page, he had written a note I had not noticed before. This formula is a gift passed through our family to help others. Guard it well, but use it generously. The measure of a man is not what he keeps for himself, but what he shares with those in need. I smiled and closed the journal. Grandpa had understood something fundamental about power and responsibility. He had created something valuable, protected it, but never hoarded it. He had found the balance I was still learning. Years passed. The HOA drama faded into neighborhood legend, the kind of story people told new residents as a cautionary tale. Amy and I got married in a simple ceremony in my backyard, surrounded by neighbors who had become family. George gave a toast about community and resilience that made everyone laugh and cry. I eventually did commercialize the formula, but in a limited way. I partnered with a small local company to produce it in small batches, with profits going to a foundation I established in my grandfather's name. The foundation provided winter assistance to elderly and disabled residents across Idaho, helping with heating costs and snow removal. The formula itself remained a secret. Only a few trusted employees knew the exact proportions, and they were bound by strict confidentiality agreements. But the product reached thousands of people who needed it, fulfilling my grandfather's vision in a way he never could have imagined. Patricia was released from prison after serving 6 years. I heard she moved to another state and changed her name. I never saw her again, and I was fine with that. Some chapters need to close completely. The neighborhood continued to evolve. Kids grew up, new families moved in, and the HOA remained functional but not oppressive. I served on the board for a term, helping to codify some of the reforms that had been implemented. We ensured that no single person could ever accumulate the kind of unchecked power Patricia had wielded. On the 10th anniversary of moving to Meadowbrook Estates, I stood in my driveway during a snowstorm and thought about how much had changed. The young couple with the golden retriever had become close friends. Their kids were teenagers now. George had retired and moved to Arizona, but we still kept in touch. The neighborhood had turned over almost completely, but the sense of community remained strong. I applied my grandfather's formula to the driveway, watching the ice melt away in minutes. It still worked perfectly, exactly as he had designed it. As I worked, a new neighbor walked by, struggling with a shovel. "Need some help," I called out. "Man, I can't get this ice to budge," he said, frustrated. "Come here, I've got something that works better." I gave him a container of the formula and showed him how to use it. His eyes widened as the ice began to melt. "What is this stuff?" "It's amazing. Family recipe," I said, smiling. "Welcome to the neighborhood." As he walked back to his house, carefully carrying the container like it was precious cargo, I felt that same sense of satisfaction I always got from helping people. This was what my grandfather had wanted. Not secret formulas locked away, but knowledge used to make life better for others. The snow continued to fall, soft and steady. My driveway remained clear. And in that moment, standing in the cold with my hands in my pockets and watching my neighbors help each other, I knew that I had honored my grandfather's legacy in the best way possible. Not by hoarding what he had created, but by protecting it wisely and sharing it generously. The HOA had demanded I share my family secret, not knowing the formula was more than just a recipe. It was a legacy of service, a tradition of helping others, and a reminder that the best things in life are not the secrets we keep, but the ways we use our gifts to make the world a little bit better. And that was a lesson worth more than any formula, no matter how effective it might be.